Hi guys, I am Shane Snipes and you're watching Sustainable 1000 TV and radio. Earlier this morning we were talking all about the South, the Southeast in particular, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Our discussions went in that area and we're talking all about food and development, and there's a nice intersection today. One of those intersections is what's happening here in Des Moines, Iowa. My guest right here is Hillary Williams, designer and also instructor at the Drake University. And it's a university here in Des Moines, Iowa, or Des Moines, as I like to say. And you guys can check us out at sustainable1000.com. You can check her gallery exhibit out at aforkintheroad.org. That's where her gallery is located, and the details about her exhibit there, which is all about food. So I'm really super intrigued about how you can create art that demonstrates what food is and how important it is to think about food in a sustainable way. How do you do that?
Well, the approach that I took was to make information graphics looking both at our larger food system, so some of the things in the front of the gallery, like this tower of barrels, looking at how much fossil fuel is used in our agricultural system and food production and transport system, and then also some information graphics in the back, looking at what food is available when, and thinking about ways we can shift how we eat.
Right. What's the yellow line over here, that triangle?
Yeah, so the yellow line, we can't quite see at the front, but this is a wall graphic to scale, charting the average distance that food travels in our country. So we start with the 1,500. For the 1,500 miles that it's estimated food travels in this country, it works its way down to an orange and red circle representing a 100-mile radius from Des Moines, which is what some locavores or proponents of local foods might espouse as an ideal distance for food to travel. If you can see the slight change in color, that's a 400-mile radius, and that's what some government documents cite as locally or regionally produced. So really mapping out those differences.
And did you discover anything in your research of creating this art about food that you didn't know before?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I mean, I grew up thinking about food, and my parents had a garden, and I think, didn't really put it together. Like, we know that all sorts of things take energy and take fuel, but you don't see it going into the food the way you see gas going in at the pump. So some astounding numbers and different relationships between things.
Wow. And for you, I noticed the yellow circle right there. Mm-hmm. Does that stand for anything?
It does. In my mind, it's sort of the summary visual statement of this idea that we are at a fork in the road, that we're really at a point in time where things might need to change, that we've built this large system, and there are so many advantages to a large industrial agricultural system, but we're now starting to see some of the externalities and side effects, and maybe want to think about reshaping those things. So this table, to me, from the front, it just looks like a circle where these symbols collide. That black and yellow V formation is actually what you see on a highway at an exit, like literally marking a fork in the road. So I'm drawing on that connotation. Around the back, it's revealed that it's actually an overturned table where the base has been an oil barrel, and it's got a quotation about some externalities of our food system.
Wow. It's very interesting to, I'm a big person, and hopefully we'll get even better with my website in terms of telling information like this graphically and having a way to explain what's happening with sustainability in a visual way, because I'm a super visual learner.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I learn 90% of the time. In fact, I could stand and I could sit and stare at a map for hours. I'm that kind of person. So I'm intrigued that you sort of wrapped all these things together. What was your desire? What did you want to communicate with this?
My starting point was really large and really idealistic. I said, I want to tackle global warming as a designer. And I came down from that scope. I did some research and began to focus on food, and then began to focus on local foods and regional foods as an alternative. So I guess I'm really interested in how I can use visual communication to prompt people to change individual habits for the common good. Not to be prescriptive about which individual habits, but to provide a lot of information graphics that raise awareness and make us see things that we might not have seen before, or hear things that we might not have heard before, and then also to provide resources or implements that we could actually use to change habits. And my hope is that that would make things possible.
Sure. I agree with you. I think it's important to make all those distinctions, especially as we are out there seeing the connection between all these different things. And ultimately, it still comes down to personal choice.
Yeah.
So the best way to influence personal choice is gradually introducing new information. So I think hopefully you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Well, is there a follow-up to this that you see in your mind?
Yeah, somewhat. So this exhibition first started in East Tennessee. I first localized it for Knoxville, Tennessee. So this is round 2, and it's been really interesting to configure it for a different space and to do research for a different locale. I have done a survey on what moves people, and I'm really interested in seeing which components speak to people or don't speak to people. So I learned something from that in the first exhibition. I'm hoping I can then move forward with that again this time around.
So do you have those really cool things like they do in the movie theaters when they have the audience there, and anytime they feel uncomfortable or like really like something, they have a little dial that they turn?
That would be another option. That would. I went low-tech analog, and I've got mason jars set in groups of 4 at 6 stations throughout the gallery. And I've set up a color-coded system in which people can simply drop a bean into a mason jar. And the spectrum that I see is 1, wow, this moves me enough to consider changing my habits. That's the red colored jar. The next step down I see as, yes, I already know this and I act in response. I want to know if I'm preaching to the choir. Am I visualizing graphics for information that we've already heard before and we could move on to other things, or is it new? Next step down is, I didn't realize this. Because I can imagine for some people this might raise awareness, but that doesn't necessarily move them to think about changing a habit. And then the last end of that spectrum is, so what? This doesn't matter to me. And I want to know, is it speaking to people or isn't it? So we'll see the beans piling up and see what people have to say.
That's interesting. And of course your demographic here is some students, right?
Yes.
And then faculty, right? Did you find any other demographics that might be folks coming in? And
interested? Yeah, I think the word really seemed to get out among some sectors of the general public between press releases and some environmental groups here in Des Moines forwarding along the word. So at the opening, we had a good balance of university and non-university people. We had some young kids who wanted to drop beans in just to play with them, and then up to some older people. So
you should have had a little mason jar for those.
Yes, just for kids
to
play with. Yeah.
That would be the label. This is fun.
Yeah. I've been very struck watching people with the beans. Kids we expect to be interested in something tangible like that, but adults too. People pick up a small metal bowl to hold cupped in their hands, and I've been really surprised how much people use that just to play with as they stand and read the information.
Sure.
So I think the tactile experience has been good for the viewer, and then for me, the response that I'm getting will be helpful feedback.
Yeah, definitely. Any early
findings?
Stats or findings on that?
So far, we're pretty much running an angle like this, the most wow responses, and then yes, and then and then a few so what, on pretty much all of the spectrums. The first time around in Knoxville, Tennessee, when I tallied all the votes, I was at a 70% wow rating overall for the show. What was most moving to people the first time around was the seasonal calendar of local foods. And that was really interesting to me because in my research I was first moved by these large statistics, national statistics about energy use and other consequences. And maybe we've heard those in the media before. Maybe they're not as moving. But a calendar that gives information on what you can actually find available here in your own locale, that seemed to be really moving, at least in Tennessee. So we'll see if it's the same here in Des Moines.
Sure. Well, something that I found that kind of corroborates that is the local movement, local food movement, local purchasing movement that's sprung up all over Middle America, especially. And it's, of course, filtered out to the West Coast and the East Coast, too, where there's a lot more awareness about recycling and other things that are sort of, we think of those as sort of step one for sustainability a lot of times. And a lot of those aren't necessarily true in the middle components of America, like Montana and North Dakota, South Dakota, even in parts of Colorado, which you might think is more green. But so I'm finding that the local message is really important, and that we can get lots of resonance and lots of interest in discovering ways to be more local.
I think that's really true. Yeah. And I think when I thought about this